just returned from spending a month in Europe. It was my first time traveling abroad all alone. Being on my own meant that I received quite an abundance of hospitality. I have lots of experience being on the receiving end of on the giving end of hospitality, and I learned a lot about authenticity, vulnerability, and human connection. Though my first experience of hospitality on this trip did not go terribly well. So there I was in Denmark, jet-lagged and feeling vulnerable. I had arrangements for my friend's family to pick me up at the airport and allow me to stay overnight. They cooked an amazing traditional Danish meal, and we all sat down to dinner. Only my friend and his mother spoke any English. The remaining 6 family members spoke none. However, no one translated for me. The conversation and laughter flowed, but I felt pretty lost. Feeling unsure, I sat there with no idea what to do, so I just smiled and nodded. I found myself being inauthentic. I wished I could get translations or just curl up in bed, but I continued to try to be my idea of a good guest. My first night affected the rest of my visit with them, and I found myself continuing to alter myself to please them, rather than allowing my sincere thoughts and feelings to come through. It was uncomfortable for me, and most likely for them too. It's challenging when you feel like you owe someone for being hospitable, but trying to alter myself for other people did not feel right. They were doing their best to be great hosts, and I was doing my best to be a great guest. I began to realize that the host's and the guest's intentions are not that different. We both want to be generous. We both want to put everyone at ease. Looking back, I believe I should have not been scared to be my true and authentic self. Fear disrupts trust. I discovered that trust is crucial in situations like this. As soon as I left for Paris, I knew I had to make a big change. I determined that I was going to be authentic with myself and with others. I would be genuine despite my vulnerability. This decision allowed me to change my mindset, and I began to open to the possibilities ahead. Flying into Paris, I looked out the airplane window, and through the dark sky, I saw the sparkling lights on the Eiffel Tower. I began to tear up as I realized that Paris was already making me feel welcome. So, fast forward a bit. I've explored and found myself absorbed in my favorite parts of Paris. But there were a few days where I found that I had not really talked with anyone. That's when I encountered an older gentleman who struck up a conversation. I was hesitant at first, but I chose not to be scared. I continued our conversation, and I am so glad I did. He told me all about where he used to live and all of the places in Paris where he thought I should visit. I was genuine despite my hesitation and vulnerability. That allowed this kind gentleman a chance to be hospitable towards me. It was such a shock to realize how much I had been craving connection. To have someone see me and speak to me filled me with a joyous feeling. Humans need to feel recognized. I had felt invisible without even realizing it. This gentleman's act of hospitality meant so much. It's very easy to get swallowed by the bustle of a big city like Paris, where there are millions of people, but you can still feel alone. This gentleman took the time to recognize me and share his history, his suggestions, and his hope for me to have a positive experience in this beautiful city. No discussion of hospitality on this trip would be complete without including Anne Frank. She is one of my heroes, and visiting her house was one of the top things I wanted to do while I was in Europe. Anne Frank was a young Jewish girl who went into hiding with her family during World War II. She lived in a hidden annex with only 4 rooms and 6 other people. For the 2 years they were in hiding from the Nazis, Anne was thrust into a situation where her life depended on the hospitality of others. For example, Miep Geiss, one of the workers at Otto Frank's shop, spent 2 years sneaking food and supplies to the people hiding in the annex. She risked her life every day to bring them the basics and even a few comforts under the most horrible circumstances. Accepting hospitality requires vulnerability, but Anne and her fellow hiders' lives absolutely depended upon the courage and generosity of people like Miep. I often wonder at her ability to put the comfort and safety of others ahead of her own. It is the ultimate act of hospitality. It was not my first visit to the Anne Frank house, but this trip was so impactful because of my own experiences with hospitality. Revisiting the extreme circumstances of Anne's life, I felt the importance of hospitality in all of our lives. Anne's story is the ultimate example of being authentic in vulnerable situations and the crucial need to simply be recognized by other human beings. As I was in the Anne Frank House Museum, it occurred to me that the museum and her diary are an act of hospitality to the world. So, whether it is saving people from scary situations or striking up a simple conversation with a stranger who is far from home, hospitality can change the world for the better. This past month, I have learned many new things about the world, about others, and especially about myself. Authenticity, human connection, and recognition should always be things we practice. I have recognized the interconnected web of life in the most beautiful ways because of hospitality. Learning to be a good guest helped me reflect upon the larger impact of being hospitable. Whether the gesture is big or small, whether you are receiving or giving, hospitality ties us all together.
You were on your way home when you died. It was a car accident. Nothing particularly remarkable, but fatal nonetheless. You left behind a wife and 2 children. It was a painless death. The EMTs tried their best to save you, but to no avail. Your body was so utterly shattered, you were better off. Trust me. And that's when you met me.
What happened? Where am I?
You died. No point in mincing words.
There was a truck, and it was skidding.
Yep.
I died?
Yep. But don't feel bad about it. Everyone dies. You looked around. There was nothingness. Just you and me.
What is this place? Is this the afterlife?
More or less.
Are you God?
Yep, I'm God.
My kids. My wife.
What about them?
Will they be all right?
That's what I like to see. You just died, and your main concern is for your family. Oh, that's the good stuff right there. You looked at me with fascination. To you, I did not look like God. I just looked like some man. Or possibly a woman. Some vague authority figure, maybe. More of a grammar school teacher than the Almighty. Don't worry. It'll be fine.
Oh. So what happens now? Do I go to heaven or hell or something?
Neither. You'll be reincarnated.
Ah, so the Hindus were right.
All religions are right in their own way.
So what's the point then? When I get reborn, I'll just be a blank slate, right? A baby. So all my experiences and everything I did in this life won't matter.
Not so. You have within you all the knowledge and experience of your past lives. You just don't remember them right now. Your soul is more magnificent, beautiful, and gigantic than you can possibly imagine. A human mind can only contain a tiny fraction of what you are. If we hung out here long enough, you'd start remembering everything. But there's really no point of doing that between each life.
How many times have I been reincarnated then?
A lot. Lots and lots. And into a lot of different lives. This time around, you'll be a Chinese peasant girl in 540 AD.
Wait, what? You're sending me back in time?
Well, I guess technically, time, as you know it, only exists in your universe. Things are a little different where I come from.
Where you come from?
Oh, sure. I come from somewhere. Somewhere else. And there are others like me. I know you'll want to know what it's like there, but honestly, you wouldn't understand.
Oh, but wait. If I get reincarnated to other places in time, I could have interacted with myself at some point.
Oh, sure. Happens all the time. And with both lives only aware of their own lifespan, you don't even know it's happening.
So what's the point of it all?
Seriously? You're asking me for the meaning of life?
Well,
Isn't that a little stereotypical?
It's a reasonable question.
The meaning of life. The reason I made this whole universe is for you to mature.
You mean humankind? You want us to mature?
No. You. Just you. I made this whole universe for you. With each new life, you grow and mature and become a larger and greater intellect.
Just me. What about everybody else?
There is no one else. In this universe, there's just you and me.
But all the people on the earth.
All you. Different incarnations of you.
Wait. I'm everyone.
Now you're getting it.
I'm every human being who ever lived.
Or who will ever live, yes.
I'm Abraham Lincoln.
And you're John Wilkes Booth, too.
I'm Hitler.
And you're the millions he killed.
I'm Jesus.
And you're everyone who followed him. Every time you victimize someone, you are victimizing yourself. Every act of kindness you've done to yourself. Every happy and sad moment ever experienced by humans was or will be experienced by you.
Why? Why do all this?
Because someday you will become like me. Because that's what you are. You're one of my kind. You're my child.
Whoa. You mean I'm a god?
No, not yet. You're a fetus. You're still growing. Once you've lived every human life throughout all time, you will have been grown enough to be born.
So the whole universe, it's just
An egg. And now, it's time for you to move on to your next life. And I sent you on your way.
My favorite definition of hospitality comes from Chevalier Louis de Jacquot, author of an 18th century French encyclopedia. Hospitality, he writes, is the virtue of a great soul that cares for the whole universe through the ties of humanity. What a delicious definition. The virtue of a great soul who cares for the whole universe through the ties of humanity. The root of the word hospitality is the Latin word hospes, which can refer to a host, a guest, or a stranger. This same root also gives us the word hospital, which I find interesting because I'm a nurse and I know hospitals. Hospitals used to be understood as chambers of guests, like inns. Well, these days, hospitals are not like any inn I've ever stayed in. But think about it. What is a guest if not a person who is entering the unknown in one way or another? And isn't a defining quality of all guests vulnerability? The guests in a hospital are called patients. They are people who have been washed ashore in a seemingly foreign land where the customs can be mysterious and the language often indecipherable and confusing. The vulnerability of guests and patients makes them both reliant on the kindness and caring and help of the locals. In the foreign land of the hospital, the locals would be the nurses and the doctors and the other personnel that the guests encounter. So if we see hospitals as chambers of guests, in which the staff are hosts and the guests are patients, then we can understand hospitality as the caring relationship between strangers. In hospitals, in these chambers where strangers meet in moments of need, the ties of humanity are forged and leveraged all the time. And in hospitals, it is nurses who forge, protect, and nurture these ties. There is an incredible intimacy in the nurse-patient relationship. It is an intimacy born not from the length of the relationship, but rather from the intensity and immediacy of need. One way to describe the bond between strangers in the guest-host relationship is that it is a brief tie of intense intimacy. Such bonds are the ties of humanity. These strands make up the web of life. I have a vivid memory of a day for my work on the high-risk obstetrics unit at the UNM hospital. I was assigned a patient. I will call her Luz. Luz's son had died a few hours after being born due to physical problems that made it so he could not survive outside the womb. For me, as a nurse, every encounter with a new patient is an encounter with a stranger. Each of these encounters carries me into the unknown. With Luz, I was not only entering the room of a stranger, but I was entering the room of a woman from another country who spoke only Spanish and who is grieving the loss of her child. Grief is its own strange land, where perhaps we are all strangers. So I had a little bit of extra trepidation on this occasion, but I also carried with me curiosity, openness, and a willingness to see what is, and a desire to connect. As I entered, I spoke my greeting. Buenos días, señora. Soy Katy. Soy su enfermera para hoy. Good morning, I'm Catherine. I will be your nurse for today. ¿Hablas español? She asked me with disbelief in her voice. Sí, señora. Hablo español, I responded. And then, with a slight smile, she said to me, Qué lindo tu acento. How lovely your accent. This made me smile. And so we found a warm tie, a smile in this space of grief, a bond between strangers. We carried on a conversation, and Luz cried freely as we talked about the death of her child. I did my nursing tasks, and as I was finishing up, Luz asked me, ¿Cuándo me lo vas a traer mi bebé? When are you going to bring me my baby? One of the small gestures of hospitality that this hospital offered was to give mothers and families the opportunity to hold their beloved children for a while before the funeral home would come for them. In that moment, in Luz's eyes, and in that yearning that forged the bond between us, I remember seeing and feeling the depth of love that grief makes known. I was invited in with this grieving mother, a mother who honestly is unusual in our world, who did not shy away from her sadness, and who trusted me with this grief and this love, and who knew that she needed my help to grieve. This was a brief and intense intimacy. This was the hospitality of the hospital. In thinking of this moment, I am reminded of the words of Dr. Dean Ornish when he said, "During the times that we feel most vulnerable, that which is invulnerable within us becomes uncovered, becomes more apparent. This invulnerable thing ties us together." I will never forget Luz. I am shaped by my memory of her. This intense experience was an invitation to share life, to be with each other, to affect one another, to experience the invulnerable together. This is what the strands in the web of life look and feel like. This is how we care for each strand. And as we care for each strand, each bond, each tie, we care for the whole universe.